Hey there, Jeff Manchester Music. Welcome. In this video, I want to talk about 3 things you can do immediately and for free that I think will help improve the sound of your mixes, compositions, masters, anything you're working on. This is stuff that I've learned throughout the course of my quote-unquote career in music, whether I'm making it for fun or making it for money. Take breaks. There's a few reasons you need to take breaks when you're mixing, mastering, doing any kind of music stuff. The first is just ear fatigue. You know, the ears get tired after a while and you might be less sensitive to certain frequencies, so you might not be hearing things objectively. Also, you know, if you're working in a very noisy environment, you know, the loudspeakers go up or the headphones go up. It's just not good for your ears, which are really the most important things you need if you're going to have any kind of semblance of a career in the music industry. So, what do I mean by breaks? An hour, an afternoon, a couple of days. This is not just good for the health of your ears, it is also good for your own sense of objectivity. What happens when you take breaks is you put distance between yourself and your creative output. And then when you reintroduce yourself to your creative output, you come back to your computer and listen to what you've done, you hear it in a new way. It's a little bit like if you're cleaning your house. You walk through your house on 2 feet every single day, your apartment, whatever, your room. And you see it in that way. But what happens when you lie on the ground and then take a look around? You're going to see things you didn't see before. I find that this is an apt metaphor for what it's like to put some space between you and your music. You reapproach it and you see things, you hear things differently, and you're also coming in with fresh ears. The other reason that it's good to take breaks is there could be things emotionally that are causing you to feel a certain way about your music. Maybe you're mixing or you're doing something, but you just came from a really crappy phone call, or you heard some bad news or some good news, or you're frustrated about something. You might not realize it, but it could be affecting and directing, subconsciously some of the choices that you're making about what you're doing and what you're creating. So you kind of cleanse your palate and you can start fresh when you take a break and come back to your stuff without all that emotional baggage. So it's good for that reason too. So take breaks. Doesn't matter if you can, you should. And I say if you can because I know a lot of people might write in the comments like, we don't have that much time to make music, clients are demanding, or, if I worry too long about my stuff, I start to hate it right away. But I really think that for your own kind of ear hygiene and, for the sake of your creative stuff, you have to find a way to put some distance between you and the music, because the music is only going to sound better if you can make it better, and you can't really make it better unless you can, again, put some distance between you and the work. And your music deserves it. It really deserves to sound as good as possible. So, number 1, take breaks often. Number 2, bring someone, if you can, into the room to listen to the music with you. I don't know what the psychological phenomenon is called in a white paper or whatever, but there is just something about bringing someone else into your listening environment, hitting the space bar, pressing play and going, what do you think? When you listen to something with someone, you hear things differently. Again, it's going back to the metaphor of lying on the floor. If you're trying to clean up, you see things you didn't see before. I was typing something out, and it was a really important email, and I brought my girlfriend in to proofread it. I didn't send it to her because I know how this works for me. I brought her into the room, and I was like, just take a look at this. Let me know what you think. And I was sitting there. And even though I had composed this letter for a long time, I'd spent like an hour on it. I read it over and over and over because she was looking at the letter. I could see things that I hadn't seen before, even though, again, I've gone over it so many times. Typos, a word that needed to be added, using the, or using any word more than once. Just things you don't see until you bring someone else in who is not you that is looking at it. So with music, you might hear things like, okay, the horns are a little bit too louder. You know what? I thought that snare was a lot hotter than it is, but it's actually really quiet. Because maybe you're thinking like, I can't wait for the big drum section to hit. And then it hits, but you're kind of listening to it through their ears all of a sudden. And the drums aren't as loud, or something is overcompressed, or you're like, oh my God, there's way too much sibilance on the singer. I thought I took care of it, but maybe I didn't, or maybe I didn't enough. There is something about introducing someone else into the room that allows you to hear it and experience the music almost vicariously through them. And this is so useful and, again, free. Obviously, if you can't find someone to bring into your house, then I guess you can go on Craigslist and be like, want to come over for $5, but that might get weird. But anyway, bring someone else into the room. Don't send off an MP3 if you can help it. Don't send off a WAV file. Don't flip it, send it to your mom or your dad. They're just going to say it sounds great and move on with their lives. Bring a living, breathing human being into the room, and I swear you will hear things differently, and your music will, again, like I said with tip 1, be better for it. And that is the goal, to make things better. So that's tip number 2, for free. Bring someone else into the environment, listen to it with you. Number 3, the last thing that you can do. Listen to your mixes, compositions, masters, whatever it is, as quietly as you possibly can for a small portion of, the critical listening session that you have, whatever your ritual is. There's a few different reasons for this. The first reason, I think, and the most obvious, the one that gets quoted the most, is that, you'll be able to hear things that are dominant or maybe not so dominant in the mix that you wouldn't really be able to hear if you're blasting everything and everything's kind of pressed up against the glass. And it makes sense, when you're looking at a painting, it's very detailed and kind of, very clear and textured. But when you go back, you get a kind of body and a shape, and certain things are less noticeable. People listen to music more often than not passively. They're just kind of hearing it in the background. And so they're not really focused up close at the painting on what you're doing. So you want to make sure that certain elements aren't poking out too much, or certain elements aren't too buried or hidden in the mix. And when you bring your mix down and everything's super quiet and you've got no HVAC noise or fridge or whatever in the background, and you can really hear stuff, you'll hear stuff poking kind of almost like surface tension, just coming up. Again, we're going to go back to these examples. The snare might come up a little bit too much, or maybe it survives. It survives the quiet mix and it's just loud enough. Or maybe, you can't hear your backup singers as well when you bring your mix down because they're kind of crowded by other stuff, by the noise floor that is the culmination of all the other instruments that aren't as apparent. And it kind of gets flooded and drowned out in that cluster. So maybe all you hear is the vocal, and if that's what you want, that's what you want, and that makes sense. But again, these are all different ways to lie on the floor and look at your environment and see things in a totally different way. If you're uncomfortable with listening to your stuff really quiet for whatever reason, another thing engineers like to do is they will leave the music on, open the door to their studio or whatever it is, and just go walk and listen to it from another room and see what comes out. So it could be that, the reverb on your vocalist is a little bit too pronounced and over the top, and it's kind of getting washed out. You're losing intelligibility in the articulation of words when you go to another room. So you might want to take care of that, make it a little bit more, my favorite word, sinewy, if you want to. So that's one reason why a lot of mixing engineers and maybe not mastering engineers so much, but people like to listen to things quietly at very low levels, because stuff just pops out that is apparent in the mix that wouldn't necessarily pop out again if you had your face pressed against the glass of the mix, everything blasting at minus 85 dB SPL or whatever. The other reason, I think, and this is really important for composers, is that your music is going to be turned down anyway. It just always is, unless you have everything under control and you are the re-recording engineer and you are the person that's going to be putting everything together, the vocals and all that stuff. Chances are you're not. You're going to be handing it over to someone who will be doing the final mix. And your hard work, all that stuff, all, that like 800 track session in Logic or whatever, that's going to be turned down to make way for Foley, ambiances, dialogue, other stuff. So it's going to get turned down anyway. Why not preview that yourself to see what still makes the cut, what still pops up and is still obvious and apparent? I found this to be a super useful exercise when I'm not in control of the post, and it's often that I'm not in control of the post, whether it's for my work with Isotope or for my own work composing or stuff. The music is always going to get turned down because dialogue is king. So if I've composed this really beautiful line or something like that, let's say it's a line of, I don't know, woodwinds, and it kind of flutters up and down, and it matches and marries the action of a character on screen. If that, is too quiet, oh my God, my burping is not quiet. If that is too quiet, then what's going to happen is, you're going to have this kind of mushy music in the background that's kind of turned down, and you're going to hear something kind of ripple up with the woodwinds, and it won't make any sense. So you might want to go, all right, I'm going to pump these up a little bit, knowing that they're going to be turned down later by some engineer, or just keep a note or something like that. But it just, again, it's a great way to gut check and reality check what is actually poking through and making the cut in your mix, and what is maybe a little bit more superfluous and maybe more about tone and ambience and vibe, as opposed to the melody lines and stuff. Or anyway, so you might have a totally different understanding of your mix until you bring it down and your singer's not loud enough, your drums aren't loud enough, or something is way too loud or distorted, or I'm not really sure. There are reasons, obviously, to listen to things nice and loud. One of those reasons is a lot of people don't have a great room to hear stuff. So if this was a super treated room, like a mastering room or something like that, I wouldn't have to crank things to hear the finer details, the kind of filigree and the very, the texture and all the stuff happening, around the mix. I have to turn it up because there's a lot of noise competing for my ears and my attention and everything. And when you turn stuff loud, you might hear artifacts, distortion, clipping, clicks, pops, hum, all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily hear if you were following my third tip and turning everything kind of down. So there are advantages to turning stuff up, but more often than not, I feel like we kind of forget to bring stuff down. Again, all in an effort to hear things, experience things differently that will only make the music sound better. So there's 3 things that you can do as composers, engineers, whatever you happen to be out there in the world, that will actually truly benefit your music and make it sound as awesome as possible. And now it's time for end cards. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I have other videos. Like, subscribe, you know the drill. Take care, leave comments. Here's the thing. What do you guys do? What are some of your secrets, tips, techniques? What do you do that's kind of out of the box and free that helps your mixes sound better? Let me know. Take care.